So you've got some notes from a library and they're really vague. They're not really specific. And as you're reading them, you're thinking, I don't know what to do with this. I don't know how to change my track. I don't know how to make my music more licensable. I don't know how to get closer to the brief or the opportunity that's in front of me. It's a very common situation actually in this business, and I want to show you in this video some ways that I have been able to get through those difficult situations, and also what I find getting vague notes generally means. Of course, generally, there are going to be exceptions to this rule, but there are some guiding principles that I think can help you make sure that you are understanding essentially how you can get closer to the to getting accepted by the library or getting onto maybe a custom queue, maybe like a sync feed sort of an opportunity. And it really comes down to taking ownership of the conversation, and I'm going to explain what that means. So this actually just happened in the syndicate where we submitted a whole track, a whole album of tracks. And a few of the tracks, the library gave us some notes on, said, oh, we need to change this. It's not quite what we want. But their notes weren't very specific. They didn't say exactly, change this sound, or at the 30-second mark, this drum fill doesn't work. They weren't giving us those kinds of notes for some of these tracks. They were just more like, we're not feeling like it's sort of hitting the mark here. It's not really capturing the right energy, the right mood, the right vibe. Just doesn't feel like it belongs on this album, but no specific instructions on what to do about that. And that's super frustrating for a composer, for a producer, and for myself when I've been in those situations and I'm like, well, what do you want me to do? I mean, I'm here to work, but those notes, yeah, you tell me that I'm off, but you don't tell me where to go. So here's a couple of suggestions right off the bat that can certainly help you. Number one, never, ever, ever be afraid to just ask for more clarification, okay? I know a lot of producers are scared to talk to their libraries and ask them for clarification, feeling that, and I get it, you don't want to feel like you are, bothering them, right? Or you're annoying them with all these questions, but are you going to be a professional sync licensing producer, or at least do you want to treat yourself as one? Well, put yourself in the shoes of a professional sync licensing producer. Maybe this is a myth you believe. Do you believe that professional sync licensing producers like myself never have questions about briefs? Like we never have misunderstandings, or we never are confused about what somebody's asking from us? That's not rational, of course. We all deal with that from time to time. There are certainly times, and many times in my career, at the beginning, more so, and at the end, even though there were some. But throughout my entire career, I have been definitely confused and unsure about what was asked of me multiple times. And the difference for you, I want you to just keep this new frame in mind. The difference between an amateur and a professional is the professional humbles themselves, puts aside their ego, and says, you know what? I'm really confused. I really don't know what you want, but I want to get you what you want. Can you please help me? That's a professional move. The amateur, well, I don't want to bother them. I'm just going to try to, I'll just guess. That's what an amateur would do, actually. So be the professional in the room and actually ask for clarification, because you deserve to have clarification, and it's your career and it's your music and potentially your money on the line, right? So it's worth a phone call. It's worth an email. It's worth a text message, however you communicate with your library. Just ask, can you guys give me more specifics on what you're asking for? Always a good idea. Number two, ask for a reference track. And sometimes better than getting clarification in written form or verbally, getting a reference track can absolutely shortcut your way to getting something that's more licensable. So if they're verbally telling you all this stuff or writing it down and you're not really understanding it, or you're interpreting it in a way, and the way that you interpreted it didn't get to their ears the right way. Like they didn't hear what you were trying to do, and you weren't really getting close to the opportunity or the brief. Well, the next best thing, if they say, hey, you can take another stab at this, is say, listen, I would really, really appreciate if you could just send me a link to a commercial that has music like this, or an artist, or even a library track, like anything that's like close to what you want here. And if there's something you want me to change, that's, you want to give me a reference track, but then tell me something about this reference track you want to have kind of customized for this opportunity. Many times showing the track and showing the music is a much better and more direct, effective communication approach than trying to describe it verbally, because many of us are not musicians, and many of us don't have all the vocabulary to eloquently describe exactly what we want out of a fictional future piece of music that doesn't exist. That's actually a really tricky thing to be able to do. But pointing your finger at a track and going, well, we want something like this. A lot easier, a lot clearer. So always see if you can get that reference track. And if they don't give it to you and they say, well, we don't really know, but it's something like this, go find a couple of tracks and say, hey, I found these 3 tracks. Are any one of these sort of what you're looking for? And if they just give you a thumbs up on, yeah, number 2, that's exactly what we want. That's what I mean by taking ownership of the conversation. So rather than playing the victim and going, oh, these people won't give me the right contract, or they won't give me the right references, they won't give me the instructions, and they're not telling me, I don't know what to do about this. And then you just kind of struggle there, stabbing in the dark. Take ownership of that and say, well, okay, well, they don't really necessarily maybe have that skill set yet, or know that they can go find reference tracks, but let me be the adult in the room. Let me go find some, be a solution giver, bring them some reference tracks. And you never know, from then on, the library actually might start using reference tracks with all of their briefs and realize, wow, that was a much more effective way to get the music that we wanted from our composer. So you actually might be doing them a big favor by doing that. But even after you do all this kind of stuff, if you're not going to get, if you can't get much more information from them, right? That can't give you a reference track. Maybe you send the reference tracks like, no, not really like that. It's got to be more like this and this. You're just not getting more specifics in terms of where you need to go with it. At that point, just do your best. I mean, that's really what you have to kind of get used to in this business many times. Is there's going to be some opportunities where you're not given a clear road of how to succeed with it, but you basically just have to give it a shot. If they're giving you an opportunity, it's still a good reason to give it a shot and try. And hopefully at the end of the gig, if you don't get it, maybe you can do a little post dive with them and say, hey, what was it about my track that just didn't quite hit the mark? I just want to kind of learn, and I'm sort of bettering my craft here through this whole process. So as long as you can learn through the whole process, it's definitely worth giving a shot. And it's just a part of this business sometimes. You don't get a lot of clear, definite direction. So just do your best. With whatever you got, just do your best, give it a shot. And, the sort of guiding, again, this is going to be a general principle, and it's not going to be applicable for every single situation you're in. But if you do get very vague notes, things like what I talked about before, oh, it's not quite hitting the mark, it's not quite in line with what we were looking for, it's not quite this or that, but you can give it a shot, you can do a revision. But they're not giving you like, oh, change this up, or maybe create a different transition here, or, they're not pinpointing specific things in your track, but they're giving you more of a vague 10,000 foot view of like, it's just not quite there. Generally means that you're just pretty far off the mark, right? And it means you might have to pretty much do a whole rewrite. That's what my general experience has been. If they can give me specific notes, if they can say, hey, this guitar lead is very distracting, just take that guitar lead out. Can you replace it maybe with a horn or something like that? To me, I'm hearing that your track is there. It's like right on par with what we want. There's a couple of things we need to tweak though to make it perfect for this opportunity, for whatever we want to do, or maybe even just getting it into their library. They need it to be a certain format. So if they're giving you specific notes, don't take that as an insult. In fact, take that as a win, a big thumbs up, a big pat on the back, because you're very, very close actually to what they want. And they're just asking you to do pinpointed specific things. I actually find this with a lot of the feedback I give in the syndicate is if I'm saying, and in my head, I'm just thinking like, it's not in the ballpark. It's not even in the arena of where we need it to be. Then it's one of those things where my notes don't need to go into the specific details of like this and this and this. Cause it's like, well, that's, I can tell you to go do a bunch of revisions, but this whole track is just not either in the right mood, emotion, or just direction generally. So I find that when I start diving in and digging into specifics for the syndicate members, they know that means that they're probably on their way to getting their track accepted onto the album, into the opportunity, whatever it is we're working on. So that's a general, sort of rule, because of course there can be people that really like your music, but they're just terrible at communication. They think your track is really, really close, but they don't know how to specifically communicate some of those little changes that you can make. So again, don't take that as a golden rule, never question it, but it's generally what I've seen in this business. If you get a lot of vague notes, probably means that you just were a little bit off focus. Maybe you need to go back to the brief, go back to whatever the original instructions were, and second guess your original interpretation of it and see if you can think of a different way to approach it. So that would be one way that essentially you can do it. But I think the bottom line to take away from this video is do not be afraid to ask questions, ask for clarification. You're not seen as a fraud. You're not seen as an annoyance. You're not seen as a horrible person or an amateur for asking questions. And if you feel that way, like if a library makes you feel that you are bothering them by asking these kind of questions, you might want to second guess working with a company like that. Just my 2 cents. I don't know if you want to stay working with a company that constantly is, or making you feel terrible about just getting clarification on something that might have been vague on their part. So, most libraries that are worth their weight and that are actually legit are going to have no problem clarifying anything that might need to be clarified to make sure that you can do better with their opportunities. So I hope this video helps you guys get through this really tricky and very common process that we go through here in sync licensing.